Last Pint Productions presents the New Way podcast. The New Way contains adult content, but since this is one of our special edition short episodes, we don't have time to record one of our comedic adult content warning masterpieces. I mean, we could have in about the same amount of time it took to tell you we wouldn't, but we didn't. So there. Listener discretion is advised.
God help you if you use voiceover in your work, my friends. God help you. It's flaccid, sloppy writing. Any idiot can write voiceover narration to explain the thoughts of a character. Years from now, you'll be standing around a posh cocktail party congratulating yourself on how you spent an entire weekend locked in a room with an asshole from Hollywood for your art.
Everybody wants to be naked and famous. Everybody wants to be just like me. I'm naked.
Will you help teach me about this? What is it? A new way?
Hello and welcome to a special edition of the New Way podcast where we break down pop culture so you don't have to. These shorter, more bite-sized episodes will feature spotlights on locations, actors, actresses, directors, writers, and more. What else? What other jobs are there? We don't even know. Less preamble, more amble. I am here joined via video chat by Mr. Ben Wilson. How you doing?
Ambalone. I'm gonna do that for
everyone now, and then I'll stupidly misinterpret it, and
it's gonna have to be Ambalone from now on. So Led Zeppelin, we're getting the rights for that.
Yes, good luck on that one. We're gonna need Cameron Crowe to get that special permission. But this special edition New Way podcast is not focusing on Cameron Crowe, but instead on the written works of one Mr. Aaron Sorkin. He is a screenwriter, a director, a producer, and a playwright. Graduated from Syracuse University with a BFA in, did you know what his BFA is in? Musical theater.
Musical theater, that's right. Yeah.
Same musical theater guy. Worked before he became a paid playwright and eventually paid screenwriter and television writer. He worked as a singing telegram, a limo driver, an Alabama touring company children's theater repertory company in Alabama.
He wasn't. It wasn't an Alabama theater company. It was a national theater company. He was just assigned to Alabama.
Which is exactly.
Because I know people that have actually gone out with.
Oh, that is amazing. A hunting and fishing show assistant and a bartender. Wrote some plays for his mentor at Syracuse, which got produced in the early 80s. And then he got in a phone call with his sister who was talking about these guys they called JAGs that were basically wartime attorneys who handle cases of what happens with soldiers that have a completely different judicial system. And that spurs him to write a play called A Few Good Men, which, of course, was later turned into a hit film directed by Rob Reiner, right?
I believe Making Movies was his first big, it was his first off-Broadway play because he, am I correct there?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, so essentially he wrote a one-act play, sent it to his professor who liked it, and then they got funding to expand it into a full-length play that was then off Broadway or something like that, or put on probably in a basement somewhere in New York. However, it got some acclaim.
Yes,
and so the whole thing was basically about a couple of producing partners. One was a director, one's a producer, trying to get a movie made, and it basically. The short came around one scene where something bad happens, and then it's just a deconstruction of their characters, and everything falls apart.
Yeah,
and his entire career is based off of that.
Yeah, which is kind of amazing. He, in addition to the things that we are going to discuss that he specifically wrote, he also has worked as a script doctor in Hollywood. He punched up scripts including The Rock, Excess Baggage, which is that's just hysterical to me. Bulworth and Enemy of the State. And the most interesting fact, bar none, of all of my researching on Aaron Sorkin for this episode, and I'm so upset that this thing is not ever happened, and it doesn't appear like it will ever be revisited again. But in around between 2010 and 2013, he was developing a music. Because my first thing when I saw that he was a BFA in musical theater was like, why has he not ever done a fucking musical? Like, that would be kind of amazing. Well, he tried. He was writing a musical based on the life of Houdini. I'm a fucking huge magic nerd, so already interested. With music by Danny Elfman and Steven Schwartz collaborating on it, and starring Hugh Jackman. This was a thing that was happening in like 2012.
And then he got arrested for cocaine.
As it says in his Wikipedia, he got distracted with movie and TV projects. But yes, I'm pretty sure that it was whatever happened, he decided to pursue his film and television career more and ditch this fucking Danny Elfman, Steven Schwartz, Houdini musical with his writing and Hugh Jackman. I literally thought I dreamt what I was reading, because that sounds like something I would make up in my head.
It sounds like a fever dream. Yeah.
It's insane. But what's kind of interesting with Aaron Sorkin going through this, he has only 15 writing credits to his name as far as film and TV go. And I think that's including some that have not yet been, have come to fruition yet. So we're going to go through these probably pretty quick, which is also why we've prepared some clips, because I think the best thing you can be doing with Sorkin in a discussion about him is listening to what he does with words. And I think for me, what Sorkin does is he writes the thing you wish you said in the moment that you think of after the fact. So
I think the before we even get into any of the clips or go through his filmography, I think the immediate comparison that a lot of people make is David Mamet, because Sorkin's always relied on very snappy dialogue, quick interchange. Basically, the idea of it being like, he was one of the ones who really kind of helped sort of patent the walk and talk, where it's just like back and back and back and back and back with a tracking shot, where we're not like going, on shoulder to shoulder, because you can't do it. Like to do that would be 1,000 edits per minute. The dialogue is so fast and comes at you so quickly that you just have to basically kind of sit back and observe it. And so obviously it was made sort of a play style. Mamet was the closest that came to it, I think, at that point, because if you think about Glengarry Glen Ross, or The Spanish Prisoner, or other things along those lines, where the dialogue kind of comes at you in this, or Winslow Boy kind of comes at you in this very kind of fast, very, 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 or even Neil Abute to that at that point in the late 80s, early 90s had a lot of his plays see a lot of acclaim with the same sort of thing, where naturalistic, kind of very quick back and forth. So I think A Few Good Men is pretty interesting as his kind of start off point for film, and like you said, entirely based around his sister, who some conversations with his sister.
Well, and it was also he sold the film rights the night before it opened. Which is also like kind of crazy that it had so much buzz and heat behind it at that point. And it was, I think it was Tom Hulce in the Tom Cruise role and Stephen Lang in the Nicholson role, which makes more sense than Nicholson. Like Stephen Lang makes much more sense as this hardened army, but that's also kind of the fun thing about Jack Nicholson, is you can completely miscast him.
Well, I mean, the line wasn't "you can't handle the truth."
The
line was, "You already heard the truth." I think.
So I mean, so in case you're like one of the like 4 people that hasn't heard this bit, it's still just a fun thing to listen to. So let's listen to a little bit of A Few Good Men here.
Lieutenant Kendrick ordered the code red, didn't he? Because that's what you told Lieutenant Kendrick to do.
Object! And when it went bad, you cut these guys loose! Your Honor, you had markers inside a phony transport! Your Honor, you doctored the logbook! Damn it, Captain! You coerced the doctor!
Consider yourself in contempt!
Colonel Jessup, did you order the code red?
You don't have to answer that question.
I'll answer the question. You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
Son, we live in a world that has walls, and those walls have to be guarded by men with guns. Who's gonna do it? You? You, Lieutenant Weinberg? I have a greater responsibility than you can possibly fathom. You weep for Santiago and you curse the Marines. You have that luxury. You have the luxury of not knowing what I know, that Santiago's death, while tragic, probably saved lives, and my existence, while grotesque and incomprehensible to you, saves lives. You don't want the truth because deep down in places you don't talk about at parties, you want me on that wall. You need me on that wall. We use words like honor, code, loyalty. We use these words as the backbone of a life spent defending something. You use them as a punchline. I have neither the time nor the inclination to explain myself to a man who rises and sleeps under the blanket of the very freedom that I provide, and then questions the manner in which I provide it. I would rather you just said thank you and went on your way. Otherwise, I suggest you pick up a weapon and stand a post. Either way, I don't give a damn what you think you are entitled to.
Did you order the code red?
I did the job.
Did you order the code red?
You're goddamn right I did!
Fucking
God
just
damn, Nicholson is so good.
it is, and I've read that monologue on paper a lot. Like
it can't. That's the thing is like one of the I think most beneficial parts about Sorkin's career is he's had people on camera that can actually deal with his shit.
Yes,
which is very play-like and very. But I mean, like you read that, there's a completely kind of like I said, like a dichotomy between the you can't correlate like what that is versus what Nicholson does.
Well, and
it's
I think
insane.
I think what's really fascinating about Sorkin's writing is he is a very liberal guy, and we're going to go through a lot of his stuff is very much on the but he also is really good at writing for these Republican right-wing pro-military. That whole speech by Nicholson there is a fuck you win speech, even though he loses at the end of it. And our quote unquote hero with Tom Cruise comes out, victorious on it. That speech hits home really hard. And I mean, I love that the things you don't talk about at dinner parties,
you want me on that wall.
Yeah,
you
exactly. Like my appearance while grotesque is like, it's such a great piece of writing. And I think that is a sign of a writer, someone that can write an opposing viewpoint so perfectly that viewpoint gains traction is amazing.
It makes all of your characters three-dimensional.
Yes.
That's the thing. It's like when you're willing to look at all of your characters as characters and not just something, not something just to motivate the plot or move it to the next point. That's when you have, I think, real talent as a writer.
Yeah.
And Sorkin does that in spades. I mean, like I think that he's absolutely one of the best as far as like fleshing out characters and just making sure that they're human and making sure that they have vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
And really like kind of digging into those and making those the focal point of like most of what he writes. It's pretty astonishing. And the thing is Sorkin occasionally annoys me because
of course.
And in the same way that Mamet or something like that annoys me, where it's sometimes, especially in film, I feel like a lot for me, I always say show, don't tell. And he's a big exposition guy because he's a stage guy. And sometimes his exposition is handled clunkily. It's not great. Sometimes you are told why a character is the way the character is, as opposed to being shown why the character is the way the character is. And it does annoy me. But there's no refuting the fact that as a voice, he's singularly important, like in American popular media. And especially just because, and we can go into it now if you want to, is Sports Night. And I love the story about like how he kind of conceptualized Sports Night is because he was writing he was script doctoring other projects. I was probably doing a lot of cocaine because he did a lot of cocaine.
Still, I think, listen, you don't write things that go that rapid fire back between people without a little bit of
and that's the thing. I mean,
stimulation.
That's why like I always kind of joked about it before I even knew. I was like, oh yeah, like if it's Aaron Sorkin, it's like Cocaine the movie.
Yeah.
But I never knew that he actually had like a cocaine problem and went to rehab and then relapsed and then went back to rehab. And like, I had no idea. But because it just seemed like it was like the way that his characters interacted just seemed like everybody was on cocaine all the time.
Well, and you mentioned like Mamet, and it's kind of interesting because like I definitely see that, like thinking about it now. Mamet writes a much more. If it's everything, it's almost like. But you look at somebody like Kevin Smith is someone I feel the same way about as far as their writing is that they all write in this. Everyone always calls it
it's hyper stylized.
Yeah, and everyone always calls it naturalistic, which always makes me laugh because I'm like, it's not. It's the farthest thing from.
It's completely. It's the antithesis of naturalistic.
It's mundane and things, but it is like the idealized version of every conversation you've had. Like everyone's got a quip, everyone says the right thing, no one stumbles or falls on their words. It's just like everything's just perfect.
Yeah, and that's actually like strangely enough, I feel like that's the biggest fault with the West Wing. So one of the biggest things that Sorkin has been involved with is the West Wing, and it's super popular for good reason. It's a great show, but the fact that there is so little kind of trip ups at any point.
Everyone's perfect.
Everyone's perfect.
Yeah. And
it feels like in even all the way down to like, you know, the president's daughter, Elizabeth Moss, like everybody's perfect. Like, everybody has something ready at that point. And so you have to accept a level of hyper stylization at that point where you're just like, okay, this isn't reality anymore. This is we're living
it's
in
a science fiction movie.
Yeah.
So that's
it's like a Stepford Wives kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I will say, I think that he has stepped out of those boundaries or has been forced outside of those boundaries when he's worked with certain people, but we'll get to that in a second.
Yeah. And I think Sports Night, you know, we talked about that at the very beginning of this quarantine. It was one of the properties I recommended especially because there were no sports, and it sounds like there's still going to sort of be some sort of sports now, but not really sports.
SEC holding strong, man.
Still soldiering on.
SEC and ACC, man, we're going down in flames, man.
But yeah, Sports Night is it is a great use of what he does. It's a really good setting for his kind of stylized dialogue because you're dealing. I think it helps when you're dealing with like on-air personalities. It's another reason why the newsroom, I think, which we'll get to as well, works so well, is that there are certain aesthetics and organizations or groupings of people that lend themselves to that kind of feel, so that you go, oh, okay, it would make sense that a bunch of people that work in a newsroom for like a top-rated network are informed and educated and probably have literature degrees and journalism degrees and stuff. And the same, you're on a Sports Night. These are all people that are at the top of their game as speakers. So it kind of makes sense. West Wing, close, except you're right. You get down to like the president's daughter, and it's like, okay, well, that's a little bit thing. But I don't know. Did you have stuff from Sports Night, or did you have sound bites from other stuff that you want to do?
No.
Okay.
I was just mentioning sports.
Yeah.
So Sports Night's a great show. I think there was no. First off, just wanted to mention again, Sports Night's awesome show. I think it's the best work that Sorkin ever did, actually. On his own on his own accord, in that he really got to the center of kind of the ESPN personality thing to me. This kind of lane between newscaster and celebrity, and this very strange, like it's something that happened in the 90s. I mean, it was just this very, very strange place where the people who talked about sports all of a sudden started becoming
Craig
celebrities.
Kilborn.
And they started becoming as big, in some cases bigger than the sports themselves. And I think that the show rides a really fine line that helps kind of the discovery of that, in my opinion. I think Sports Night's great. I think that the network didn't know what they had, which is why there's a laugh track for the first half of the first season, and then it just randomly disappears.
It was a single camera comedy half hour that did not exist in 1998. That was not a thing you did. also begins a precedent with Sorkin with the network, by the way, which we're going to find is a continuing issue through every single one of his television properties. It all starts with Sports Night. Another really kind of interesting connection, and I don't want to get quite to this property yet, but I love that he does Sports Night in 98, and then he does The Newsroom in 2015, which is essentially Keith Olbermann esque, like, because he talked a lot about how Will McAvoy is based a little bit on Keith Olbermann, who was originally a Sports Center sports night thing, which is sort of interesting on there. But
I didn't realize that he actually based on Keith Olbermann.
Not it's not a 1-to-1, but it's
I mean, because for me, that character that's played by Jeff Daniels in The Newsroom is a lot more like an Anderson Cooper to me. Like, he's somebody that everybody likes, that everybody's like, he's right down the middle because he doesn't ruffle any feathers, and then decides to go far left.
No, I think there's the edge is there with, even though he still says the right things, I think I don't think Will's ever as likable even before his thing as somebody like Anderson Cooper. He reminded me more of like a Chris Matthews, not quite as much of like Chris Matthews, but the Olbermann thing was apparently where Sorkin drew a lot of inspiration of, like, just kind of this guy that gets pushed that has made this sort of decision to kind of eventually push out of that. But and we'll get to that one. I do want to, we talk about the West Wing. So after Sports Night kind of fizzles, right? With the network doesn't know what to do with it. They've gone through all of these changes.
Great rating, or not great ratings, but great reviews.
Yes,
like, everybody loves the show.
Everything just like starts to fall apart. And there's Robert Guillaume has a stroke.
That time, in the late 90s and early 2000s, like, shows that didn't have, like, they could have been critically completely revered, and if it wasn't clocking over a 3.2, then it was going to get canceled.
Yep.
Whereas, like, now, like, anybody would, like, kill for that fucking rating.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's a completely different landscape. But yeah, I mean, sports. Everyone always talk about that. That's a seminal show as far as inspiring so many other things. Like, you don't have even something like Arrested Development without Sports Night happening first and saying, "Hey, you don't have to do the Desi Lou 3-camera setup and laugh track and all that shit." Even Scrubs was a great one that came off the same issue as Sports Night. Is they wanted they start with a laugh track in that first season, and they're like, this is not a laugh track show. Like, you've gotta, they had to really train the networks outside of that. And then, so the West Wing happens, and the West Wing, he bows out after like season 4. Yeah, I think he has a huge fallout with the West Wing, and and then they do Sorkin Light for several seasons after he goes, to varying degrees of success.
They hired people that just sounded a lot like Aaron Sorkin.
It's interesting because you can't, when you are super stylized, you do become very able to parody and stuff. Sure. But just so we get a little bit of West Wing, this is a bit I kind of looked up stuff because I never watched West Wing. It's one of those properties I really have always wanted, because everything I watch in small form I enjoy, and I like so much else of Sorkin stuff that I think I like it. I'm just always reticent because he left in the middle, and I don't want to like lose that and have to deal with that. But this is a little bit from the West Wing, which you're going to hear in all these clips start to sound a little bit similar in how people talk.
Forgive me, Dr. Jacobs. Are you an MD?
A PhD.
A PhD?
Yes, sir.
In psychology?
No, sir.
Theology?
No.
Social work?
I have a PhD in English literature.
I'm asking because on your show, people call in for advice, and you go by the name Dr. Jacobs on your show, and I didn't know if maybe your listeners were confused by that and assumed you had advanced training in psychology, theology, or healthcare.
I don't believe they are confused, no, sir.
Good. I like your show. I like how you call homosexuality an abomination.
I don't say homosexuality is an abomination, Mr. President. The Bible does.
Yes, it does. Leviticus
18:22.
Chapter and verse. I wanted to ask you a couple of questions while I had you here. I'm interested in selling my youngest daughter into slavery, as sanctioned in Exodus 21:7. She's a Georgetown sophomore, speaks fluent Italian, always cleared the table when it was her turn. What would a good price for her be? While thinking about that, can I ask another? My chief of staff, Leo McGarry, insists on working on the Sabbath. Exodus 35:2 clearly says he should be put to death. Am I morally obligated to kill him myself, or is it okay to call the police? Here's one that's really important, because we've got a lot of sports fans in this town. Touching the skin of a dead pig makes one unclean, Leviticus 11:7. If they promise to wear gloves, can the Washington Redskins still play football? Can Notre Dame? Can West Point? Does the whole town really have to be together to stone my brother John for planting different crops side by side? Can I burn my mother in a small family gathering for wearing garments made from two different threads? Think about those questions, would you? One last thing. While you may be mistaking this for your monthly meeting of the ignorant tight-ass club, in this building when the president stands, nobody sits.
One
again, also just great performance by Martin.
Yeah, and
Martin
that is
there.
exactly why I chose 5 clips for this specifically, because I think the one thing that is discounted with Sorkin is you're right. Not everyone can deliver Sorkin dialogue, and some people deliver it great, but it all sounds. It's just Sorkin's voice, right? It's all of them. The ones I picked specifically took that great work that he's doing with the writing and their interpretation. And you look at Martin Sheen's delivery is so much more subdued and calm, which is something that Sorkin's dialogue doesn't typically sound like. And there's one other one that I have a feeling you might have pulled the same clip, because I remember you telling me about this performance before I saw it, and you were in awe of this specific scene. But there's certain deliveries that are so casual in their portrayal of what he's doing that it adds a weight. And I think that Martin Sheen performance there is a complete example of someone that's entirely in control of the situation, and they're so laid back with it. I love that shit. It's amazing.
No, I mean it's and the thing is it's very precious writing. I mean, there's no other way.
It's a great word for it.
It's I mean, like Tom DeLillo and Bret Easton Ellis are fucking coming all over themselves. Listening to these guys basically like putting each other down, and which is very common in these. And these movies or shows that are written by Sorkin. But it's like I said, it's done with such panache and like such bravado, and it's usually so well communicated by the actor that it becomes so forgivable for me. And that's like all the things kind of led to the Newsroom, which is the most recent thing that Sorkin wrote for TV. And I know a bunch of people found that show completely obnoxious because it felt like it was kind of preaching to the choir. It felt very kind of pedantic in the way that it was approaching kind of modern issues. And I personally liked the idea of just kind of populating a newsroom with all of these different personalities and focusing on that, because really ultimately the show was more about that for me than it was about the issues. The issues were kind of the background.
Sure.
Me. And so I ended up loving the Newsroom.
Me too. Yeah, I don't know. You and me and Beth talked about that show a lot. And my brother, of course, who works in TV news, and our friend Ches, who worked for CNN, who is literally the one producer. Thomas Sadowski. I forget what his character's name is, but that was 100% like exactly like who this guy was, modeled in that same type. But
the one who sleeps with a living among.
Yes. I think what's kind of fascinating about Sorkin's thing is that you, Ben Wilson, are a very gifted writer in your own right. And you're also a very...
Well, thank you. I disagree with that.
I thought you were going to say I agree with that, which is even funnier.
Well, thank you. I agree with that.
But I think...
Tell me more about how I am awesome. I feel like Lemony Snicket all of a sudden.
Well,
like,
so what's funny is, but you are also very opinionated about art and film and TV and writing and all of those things. And Ches was a similar person in that. And Sorkin should not work for your temperament. Like and when you use the word precious, that's exactly right. That there's almost an upsetting enjoyability about his work, is that you shouldn't like it. You shouldn't maybe think that this is because it is a little too neat and a little too tidy and a little bit too look at what I'm doing here on the paper, but it's so
you should tell
fucking
the
good.
You should tell the actors to make up whatever they want to and not follow the script. But
I think
it's so good.
I equate you watching Sorkin to the late great Ian Holm in Big Night, having the breakdown when he eats the timpano. That it just throws his shit down and is just angry at what you like about it.
Actually, I mean, that's not that far off, because it really is like, it breaks so many rules for me, where it's so self-referential and so exposition heavy, like where you're, like I said, I'm a big show don't tell guy, and I believe that visually film is a medium where you don't need to have this ridiculous amount of exposition to, tell a compelling story.
Well, one of the reasons I bring up you and Ches, just because you guys both responded specifically to a movie in the exact same way. And you told me about this movie before I saw it. And you said there's a scene, and you go, you'll know what the scene is when you see it. But there's a scene in this movie that is just fucking crazy. And I'm going to play, this is the shortest clip I have on here. It's not crazy short, but you're going to know what I'm talking about once we hear it.
Let me rephrase this. You sent my client 16 emails. In the first 15, you didn't raise any concerns.
Is that a question?
In the 16th email, you raised concerns about the site's functionality. Were you leading them on for 6 weeks?
No.
Then why didn't you raise any of these concerns before?
It's raining.
I'm sorry?
It just started raining.
Mr. Zuckerberg, do I have your full attention?
No.
Do you think I deserve it?
What?
Do you think I deserve your full attention?
I had to swear an oath before we began this deposition, and I don't want to perjure myself, so I have a legal obligation to say no.
Okay, no. You don't think I deserve your attention?
I think if your clients want to sit on my shoulders and call themselves tall, they have a right to give it a try, but there's no requirement that I enjoy sitting here listening to people lie. You have part of my attention. You have the minimum amount. The rest of my attention is back at the offices of Facebook, where my colleagues and I are doing things that no one in this room, including and especially your clients, are intellectually or creatively capable of doing. Did I adequately answer your condescending question?
So good.
I watched that movie a week after you told me about that with Ches and my brother.
Answer your condescending question.
It is so choice. It is so perfect. But I remember you literally, I'm like, what did you, you saw it and you're like, I go, what is it? And you're like, man, there are moments that are just like, holy shit. Electric moments.
And that's entirely because of writing. I mean, like, you can't write better than that. And that was the thing, is like, I remember watching that movie and just being like, oh, like, because here's the thing, Sorkin within this framework of Fincher, like, oh, we're not going outside of this box. Like, it has to exist within
like
this
calculus
box.
in art form.
Yeah, exactly. It's like basically you have, to solve this crazy puzzle, but it's all like within this really tiny box, like from an aesthetic standpoint. And which is why I really think that movie worked so well, is because restraint always helps filmmakers and screenwriters, like being able to have that understanding that like, oh, well, shit, they're going to change this, or that they're not going to like this, or anything along those lines. I think it really actually ends up helping filmmakers on both sides, because both from a writing standpoint and from a directing standpoint, containing the story made The Social Network work for me.
Yeah.
And there are so many great scenes and so many great interactions in that movie that feel very Sorkin-esque, but they're not sprawling in the way that a lot of this TV stuff is.
Yes. And I think that's all. I think that part of that also is and the TV is, he's much more. So the power in television in serialized and semi-episodic, which is sort of where he falls in between those two things. He really straddles those two lines. The power in those really come from the writers and the showrunners and the creators. They're really, they, as we talked about with Damon Lindelof, they're kind of where the buck stops. Everything is filtered down through them. You get directors then, but the directors are meant to continue the aesthetic that has been established and keep the status quo going. Versus in a film, especially something like Social Network, you have Fincher, who has a very clear vision and idea of what he wants to do, and you have Sorkin, and the two of them collaborate and they say, hey, here are the parameters we want. Let's think about casting. Okay, so they thought about Michael Cera for Zuckerberg, which physically, in theory, could absolutely work. It does not work for Fincher and Sorkin's
exactly.
Zuckerberg movie.
They needed Eisenberg. They needed somebody who was comfortable
being an asshole.
With that type of vernacular and just basically being like,
and just unlike I think Sarah's too likable. Like I don't think I would, and I don't. You're not the way they paint, and for better or for worse, whether Zuckerberg is a villain or whatever it is, I don't really consider the Facebook movie to be going to be a documentary of any kind. It's just a compelling, interesting story that happens to contain real
honestly,
people.
I like my favorite scene in that movie is at the end when it's Andrew Garfield confronting Jesse Eisenberg as Zuckerberg, and Justin Timberlake is there, of course, in the background as what's his face, the guy who founded Napster. But he,
Sean Parker.
Sean Parker, yeah. But he says, he says something about like, where are your bags? And he's just like, I'm sorry. I left them. I left them with my Prada, my fuck you flip flops.
You pretentious asshole.
And it's such a fucking great like throwaway line. He also just so perfectly delivered.
Well, that one is also one of those that you can actually go online because he breaks a laptop in that scene, and that's one of the famous Fincher like 87 takes or something, and you can watch him do that scene over and over and over, and you start to, the same as you were talking about Blue Jasmine, there are certain scenes where Fincher knows like I need this guy to be at the end of his fucking rope, and he's not there yet.
I want him at the end of his rope.
and he goes, I know how to get him there. I'm gonna make him do this fucking scene 80 times and break a laptop 80 times and just being props, be like, next, again, just over until he fucking comes in hot, like real fucking hot. And it's great. I mean, that movie is super fun.
But that also leads to what I think is probably the best work, in my opinion, that he has done, and especially with the marriage with the director and with the material, which is Moneyball. I think Bennett Miller, the marriage of him and Bennett Miller is a very quiet show, don't tell director. And so how are you going to deal with a guy who's like that, who is very methodical about his imagery, about like what he does? How are you going to marry that with somebody who is very exposition heavy? And I think Moneyball, I mean, it's arbitrary because it's a sports movie, but it is exceptionally well made. And it was one of the first times that people looked at like Jonah Hill as being like a serious actor. And but ultimately, like I think that movie, and like I said, people might consider it a throwaway movie. I mean, Bennett Miller had come off of Capote. Bennett Miller had come off of doing some really big movies, and then went on to do Foxcatcher and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Moneyball is that's a fucking powerhouse movie. Like that. I mean, you're talking about Brad Pitt. I don't think has ever been better than he is in that movie. He's so understated and he's so quiet and so smart in his decisions in that movie, which is all based off of Bennett Miller. But the scenes where the dialogue has to sizzle, it absolutely does.
And it's funny. I wanted to pull the clip of he gets on base, which is a great fucking scene in that movie. And the only problem is it doesn't play well.
We're looking for Fabio
audibly, like, and I think that's what Bennett does. Is one of the few directors I think that has visually and through editing done a really good job with Sorkin's dialogue, is that scene doesn't play as well just listening to it. A lot of Sorkin stuff we can do here, it doesn't really matter what it looks like.
It sounds like a play.
But it's a very dry scene. It is literally a group of 15 men talking about batting statistics. And especially if I'm not a big sports guy, so I'm just sitting there just like, if I'm watching this, I should be completely disinterested in everything I'm seeing.
But I mean, there's so many great decisions made in that movie where, like, especially at it's like the first game or second game of the season. And so they've done this huge experiment or whatever, and it just cuts this wide shot of the hallway. And you just see a chair fly and hit the other wall, and that's it. And it's just like, oh, you get the shit. You get that Billy Bean's pissed off. You don't have to show Brad Pitt. You don't have to show anything. It's like I said, he's a very show don't tell director. So it's this strange marriage that ends up just working out so perfectly. Like
it's also the least cold of Sorkin's. Some of his film work can often feel cold.
I think a lot of that also has to do with the relationship between Billy Bean and his daughter.
Yes.
In the movie, and there are these kind of warm kind of tendrils that are thrown out there. Chris Pratt is the catcher turned first baseman, which is hysterical.
That was the first time he had to get in shape. Started bouncing around while I was doing Parks and Rec on that.
I just love the line though. He's just like, "What's your worst fear?" He's like, "Getting the ball hit to me." He's like, "No, seriously." He's just like, "Getting the ball hit to me."
It's funny. It's one of those movies that I don't think a lot of people also necessarily associate Sorkin with.
No, but
just in general, but it really is.
I really think it's his best work. I really think from a writing standpoint versus a director standpoint.
Yeah,
that movie, there is nothing wrong with that movie. And I can't point to something and say, oh, change that, it's going to make the movie better, because I think for what it is, I think it's a perfect movie.
Yeah.
And just think about the scene. I mean, of course, it's been often gift and whatever, but where they're dealing with trades and stuff along those lines, and you cut to Jonah Hill, and he's just like, or whatever. Like, I mean, but it's just smart direction. It's smart writing.
Since this is radio, Ben just did the yes, I nailed it. Got it. The fist thing. Yes.
Yeah. The Jonah Hill. I fucking did it.
I fucking did it. Yeah, I think it's and it's funny, and that is probably his quietest work, as that he's kind of involved in. It was
like I said, I'm sure that there were totally like scenes excised and like tons of dialogue that was excised because Ben Miller was like, no, we don't need that. And the same as I feel like with all really talented writers is you need somebody there to kind of rein you in, like to say, this is our story. This is kind of the parameters of what we're existing in. Let's live within this box. Well, and I think that's kind of what Fincher did. Fincher, I think, also kind of leaned into it. He leaned into the idiosyncratic part.
Yeah, and I have another one I want to go into where I think there's a lean in as well, and it is also kind of interesting that it's a lean in from someone who, in their own right, is they passed away since, very much comes from a writing background as a filmmaker, and that's Mike Nichols, who directed Charlie Wilson's War. Which was a Sorkin script. And what's really funny with a lot of Sorkin stuff is you know me, Ben, my memory is it's not what it used to be. Just the older I get, the worse it is. But I've noticed that a lot of movies I gravitated to in history round up being movies that, looking back on them, like, oh, I never associated Charlie Wilson's War as a Aaron Sorkin movie, but I really fucking love that movie.
Sure.
And the same with Moneyball. It's another one where I'm like, I remember showing that movie. It was one of like my short list of movies to show my mom and my brother when she came into town for Christmas one year. I was like, I just saw this movie. I think this is like, I think everyone will really get into this. And Charlie Wilson's War was one as well. But Charlie Wilson's War is Mike Nichols directing, who obviously directed The Graduate, among 1,000 other things. But it is
in recent history, Closer and
the Birdcage. I mean, it's very prolific writer and director,
and also stage savvy was a big guy.
And this is where this is keeping with my performers doing Sorkin, who I like to hear doing Sorkin, and I did not pick Tom Hanks from this one, nor Julia Roberts, who I would never pick, but I pick her maybe above Sandra Bullock, but other than that, not so much. But I did pick the late great Philip Seymour Hoffman for a little clip from Charlie Wilson's.
Okay,
the best.
I know it was difficult for you to come in here hat in hand. That's not the kind of upbringing.
And that's John Slattery.
It's not the kind of man you
here.
are. I understand that. I'm not looking to humiliate you or exact a price in any way, so why don't you just apologize? We'll call it water under the dam, and we'll go about our business.
Excuse me, what the fuck?
What?
What the fuck are you talking about?
Claire George said you were coming in here to apologize.
No, I'm supposed to come in here so you could apologize to me.
According to whom?
Claire George.
You told me to go fuck myself. I'm supposed to apologize to you?
Also, water goes over a dam and under a bridge, you poncy schoolboy.
Clearly there's been a miscommunication between Claire George and somebody.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Does this look all right?
It's fine.
I can sand it down a little.
I don't know. No fucking idea who this guy is.
He is here to fix the glass that you broke the last time you were here. Could you just excuse us for a second? There. Tell me to go fuck myself, and I'm supposed to apologize.
Yeah.
You break my window. I'm supposed to apologize.
The Helsinki job was mine.
The Helsinki job was not yours. If it was yours, you'd be in Helsinki.
Alan Wolf stood in this
Alan
office.
Wolf is no longer the director.
It was on the
Alan
books.
Wolf is no longer the director of European operations. He does not make those appointments I do.
Promises were made.
Not by me.
I've been with the company for 24 years. I was posted in Greece for 15. Papandreou wins that election if I don't help the junta take him prisoner. I've advised and armed the Hellenic army. I've neutralized champions of communism. I've spent the past 3 years learning Finnish, which should come in handy here in Virginia, and I'm never ever sick at sea. So I want to know why I'm not going to be your Helsinki station chief.
Your course.
Excuse me.
For Helsinki, I need someone with diplomatic skills. You don't have them.
Is that right?
That is right, and I don't know why the hell I didn't fire you when you broke my fucking window.
Oh, yes, sure you do, Cravely.
Look, Gus.
Yeah, you're fucking Roger's fiancé, and you know I know.
I'm not even going to dignify that with a response.
Yeah, you're dignifying her in the ass at the Jefferson Hotel, room 1210. But let me ask you, the 3,000 agents Turner fired, was that because they lacked diplomatic skills as well?
You're referring to Admiral Stansfield Turner?
Yeah, the 3,000 agents, each and every goddamn one of them first or second generation Americans. Was that because they lacked the proper diplomatic skills? Or did Turner not think it was a good idea to have spies who could speak the same language as the people they're fucking spying on?
Well, I'm sorry, but you can hardly blame the director for questioning the loyalty to America of people that are just barely Americans in the first place.
Yeah, well, I'd like to take a moment to review the several ways in which you're a douchebag.
Get the fuck out of my office!
Yes, sir.
Before I end your career, asshole.
Yes, sir! Yeah, my friend, I'm gonna need you for a second.
God damn it!
My loyalty? For 24 years, people have been trying to kill me. People know how. Now, do you think that's because my dad was a Greek soda pop maker, or do you think that's because I'm an American spy? Go fuck yourself, you fucking child.
The only part that
Jesus
doesn't
Christ is so good.
The only part that doesn't translate that I want to put as the capper on that is after this whole scene, Hoffman storms out and he's walking by one of the secretaries and he goes, "How'd I do?" She goes, "Great." And that it's a really quiet, tiny moment, but it is such a great cap on that scene. It does not translate audibly, but fuck, like this is what Sorkin does: is you put him together with the right actor, and it's a chemical reaction that just fucking explodes. And Slattery's doing no small part in that scene as well. To be playing opposite a fucking bull in a china shop that is Philip Seymour Hoffman, but it is writing that makes you upset. It really is so good. It really makes you upset at how fucking good it is.
At how bad of a writer I am.
Well, listen, if we're all going to compare ourselves to Aaron Sorkin as far as our writing talent, we're really all fucked.
Yeah, we're seriously fucked there.
But yeah, I mean, there are endless properties we could go into with the Newsroom, the Steve Jobs movie, which is
I have a really interesting take on.
I'm curious.
I didn't watch the Steve Jobs movie initially just because it got really bad reviews, and even though there was kind of unanimous praise for all the performers in it. Fassbender as Steve Jobs, Seth Rogen, who is fucking amazing in that movie.
Yeah,
by the
he
way.
is.
God damn, is Seth Rogen so good in that movie? Jeff Daniels, awesome in that movie. Of course, I forgot his name, but he's been nominated for an Academy Award for like
Stuhlbarg.
Stuhlbarg.
Yeah.
Michael Stuhlbarg. Yeah.
By the way, he is definitely going to wind up on one of our lists here soon. One of the fucking greatest character actors working right now.
He's been everything.
He's amazing.
It's insane. But yeah, Michael Stuhlbarg. Where was I going? What was I
talking about? Steve Jobs.
So sorry, but as far as that movie is concerned, there's a moment at the end of that movie, or close to the end of that movie, that's a confrontation between Steve Jobs, being played by Michael Fassbender, and Seth Rogen playing
Wozniak.
Steve Wozniak, and I think that is one of the best dialogue, and it's apparently pretty close to accurate to what actually happened. And there were other people in the room who heard it, same as what happens in the movie where he was like, "Don't leave, we're not shutting this down." And but the one line that I love that absolutely stuck was apparently true, which is where he said, "You know what used to happen when people said, what I thought of Steve Jobs? I said he was the big picture guy, and I'm like a solid workbench. Now people ask what I think about Steve Jobs. I say he's an asshole." And that apparently got said, and it felt like such a Sorkin line.
Yeah.
And so in the context of that entire sequence, it almost feels out of place because it's so perfect, like it's such a perfect capper of this sequence, where they're going back and forth with these jabs. But yeah.
Well, and it's a super interesting film in concept and theory and if anyone doesn't know, I mean, obviously it's about Steve Jobs, founder of Apple, but it basically, the idea is it takes like 4 Apple launches or 3 Apple launches, and you're watching the immediate build up to each of these speeches he goes out and gives, which is a great plot device, especially if you're doing
directed
a play.
by Danny Boyle,
who came in for Fincher, right? Was Fincher dropped out and Boyle took it over?
I can't be sure on that.
Yeah, I forget. I think it was Fincher that was originally doing it, and it was because it was going to be Fincher and it was Christian Bale before it was Fassbender, and then they kind of reworked it and brought in Boyle.
I can't imagine Christian Bale's. I mean, obviously Christian Bale can play whatever he wants.
Yeah,
but
I mean, I would still watch that film too.
Has a look.
Yeah. I think it's like it's one of those movies. I think that one's less about the casting, other than maybe Rogen, who I think really does a bang up job.
I mean, that's what I've always told people. I was just like, if you don't think that Seth is like a good actor, watch that movie, because he inhabits that character and does a really great job about the vocalization of it.
Yeah.
And just the mannerisms, and even Steve Wozniak was like, "Oh, dude, he's like dead on, like me."
Versus the other film with Ashton Kutcher and Josh Gad, I like Josh Gad, but a little different dynamic. I
don't mind Ashton Kutcher either. But,
yeah,
I mean,
but yeah, it's good, and then Sorkin gets back. The most recent thing he's done was back on stage with To Kill a Mockingbird, where he reunited with Jeff Daniels, who's now worked with like 3 times, because Daniels is a really good delivery system for Sorkin dialogue.
I mean, but can you really think of a better Atticus Finch than Jeff Daniels? I mean,
Daniels is just a sneakily good performer all around, and I think Sorkin recognizes also that he can give him some of the most sardonic and difficult to swallow dialogue, and Daniels will make it palatable and likable. But maybe Martin Sheen being the only other person I think that can really soften the blow of kind of what Sorkin does best with his work. But yeah, it really is. He is a fantastic writer who I more and more will just follow. Really, whatever they do, and I think that's a hallmark of a lot of the people that we choose for these kind of shorter episodes. These are people whose careers you get excited when you hear about them being involved in a new property, or you'll go to see it just because they're involved in it.
And to case to point, I still remember when The Social Network was coming out, and when they first announced it, and I was like, oh, they're fucking optioning the Facebook. They're gonna make a Facebook movie. I'm like, oh yeah, David Fincher is directing it. I was just like, oh, like Aaron Sorkin's writing it. I'm like, oh, and they're like, Trent Reznor is gonna do the score for it. I was just like, fuck, I'm there.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, there's certain additions of things, but yeah, he's got a couple of things coming up that are kind of interesting. One is this. So you may have heard an episode recently where we talked about Cate Blanchett, who is going to be starring in a Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz biopic, potentially alongside Oscar Isaac. That is going to be written by Aaron Sorkin, which is sounds like I'm fucking there for that one 100%. And the other is the Trial of the Chicago 7, which he directed. Yeah. And that one, let's talk about just a few strong actors in that one, like Eddie Redmayne and Sacha Baron Cohen and Jeremy Strong. If you're a big Succession fan, you'll enjoy that name. Mark Rylance, Joseph Gordon-Levitt,
sucks.
Franklin Jella,
sucks.
So that's another one that I think is
Franklin Jella.
Franklin Jella is on my list for folks to talk about, especially his work in The Box, directed by Richard Kelly.
by one Richard Kelly.
But anyway, I think that'll put us to bed for this one. But hopefully, go out there and watch some Aaron Sorkin stuff. It's awesome. It's gonna make you feel good, and you're gonna want to talk like that so bad.
Yeah, Sports Night, I believe, is available on streaming, and The West Wing is what's it available on right now? Netflix or Hulu?
I'm not sure. And one other one that and I didn't bring it up on here just because it was such a quick flash in the pan, but I did absolutely love it. Oh, Steven Weber, that's the name I was thinking of with my hair. Looks a lot like him because he was in this property. Is Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip. If you are an SNL fan, Sorkin did his own version of it with the first thing I ever saw Sarah Paulson in was that show.
That's only going to be available on Peacock.
Enjoy
your Peacock.
It was just fantastic. I will rewatch that. They made it 2 seasons. It was way too, like, if you think Sports Night and Newsroom were inside baseball, Studio 60 was 1,000 times that. But I love it as a sketch comedy SNL fan. So check that one out too. We thank you for listening to the New Way podcast, and we'll talk to you next time. Cheers.
Cheers.